So when Marion and Jennifer and I were talking about organizing this session and how we would sort of divide up and who we would ask to speak, everyone kept saying, we really want to know more about how you manage PLOS One. That's a lot of stuff. What do you do? What do you do? So I eventually agreed to talk a little bit about that. I know my my little biographical sketch was pretty flippant. So I'll tell you a little bit about where I've been. I've been at PLOS now for just about 15 months, so I'm fairly new there. And before that, I was the editorial director at the AACR, American Association for Cancer Research, and there are 7 journals. And before that, I was at Highwire Press. And before that, I was at ISI, which is now Thomson Reuters, for about 18 years. Which is why when I added it all up and I said, oh my God, it's been more than 30 years, that I thought, I started hyperventilating and thought, oh, let me just not even talk about it. But it's good to know. I have made my career of trying to figure out how publishing works from many different angles. So I wanted to talk a little bit first about PLOS, and that will give us a good feel for why we ended up where we are because of where we started. So PLOS, of course, is Public Library of Science, and we were originally founded as an advocacy organization. We weren't a publisher when we started. And we were there to be a disruptive force in scholarly publishing, change things, move away from the traditional, do something new and exciting and different. So we've been around for about 13 years, and we've been publishing journals for just about 10 and a half years. We have offices in San Francisco and in Cambridge in the UK. And we're the largest not-for-profit publisher, and since 2010 we've been self-sustaining. So we're pretty pleased with that. We define open access like this. It's not just free content. It is immediately open and without a lot of license restrictions. So it encourages reuse and without cost to readers. So the founders decided that, just saying open access is a good thing wasn't enough. We actually had to show that it was going to work. So in 2003, they started their first journal, PLOS Biology, followed closely afterwards by PLOS Medicine. So we're just about at the 10-year mark with both those journals. And then we started 4 community journals, computational biology, genetics, pathogens, and neglected tropical diseases, which was actually an offshoot from PLOS Medicine. And then in 2006, at the very end of the year, we started PLOS One. So the first journals were really fairly traditional in the sense of the way that they operated from an editorial point of view, and from the production point of view as well, fairly traditional. The thing that was different about them was they were open access. The author paid for the publication process, and there were no barriers to readers. When we started PLOS One, however, we sort of set out to break the mold and to do something completely new and different. And that affected both the editorial process as well as production, which is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So the editorial criteria completely shifted. So for most journals who are trying to publish, important work, their process runs around getting in a lot of manuscripts and filtering for the things that are most interesting and the things that will have a biggest impact on the field. For PLOS One, we flipped that on its head, and we look to only exclude things that don't meet those editorial criteria. So we do a lot of filtering for, has the research been done properly? Do we know that the animal ethics have been followed strictly? Is it, if it's a clinical trial, have the guidelines been followed. We do a lot of that for PLOS 1. And then if it passes all those things and it goes out to a review and the reviewer says, yep, this looks good, and then the editors and reviewers push that forward, and we don't have to worry about whether or not this is going to be an important article. The idea being we don't know what's important until it's out there and people read it and determine its importance. So we started off sort of slowly. Things built slowly at first. And then in 2010, the floodgates opened. So this is just a quick look at the top purple line is manuscript submissions. And the blue line is the number of articles that were published in each of those years. And so you can see, and the difference between 2009 and 2010, it's pretty much doubled. But what it doesn't tell you here is if we plotted that month by month, most of that big shift happened at the second half of the year. So we were overwhelmed, basically. And there was so much coming in that no one really knew what to do. And it caught us a bit unprepared. And we had to figure out, okay, how are we going to deal with all this stuff coming in? I'm not even going to talk about the editorial side of things, because we're working on that too. But just from the production end, that's a lot of stuff to process through and post online. Yes, I should say, these are online-only journals. All of our journals are online-only. PLOS 1 publishes continuously, so we post daily. There's no continuous pagination. There's just a date, and that's, and DOIs, of course. But there's no concept of an issue for PLOS 1. So because there was that thought that everything that deserved to be published that had been well-done research, and we had no limit on the number of accepted manuscripts or page limits or any other kinds of artificial sort of tamping down of what was going through the system, things just grew like Topsy, right? and there were also some assumptions made on the production end that what people sent us was going to be in decent shape. That if we told the authors that they should give us figures in a particular size and DPI, that they would do that. And they wouldn't need any help. And they wouldn't need to see a proof, and we wouldn't need to copy edit those papers. This was going to be swift. We would send this stuff out to review, we would know that this was good research, and we'd just get it out there. Yeah. And that really works when you're doing like 3,000 articles a month, right? No. Not so much. On the editorial side, I should tell you, we see an average of about 190 to 200 papers come in, new papers come in a day. So, what happened? Well, we had this rapid, extreme sort of growth, and we had a number of decisions to make, and really quickly. So, what do? Do you hire more staff? Should we just hire enough people to handle all that throughput? Well, what if it didn't last? What if you hired all those people and then this was just a fluke? So we had a very conservative approach to actual internal staffing growth, and we ended up using a lot of external vendors for a number of different things, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And we were hedging our bets that maybe this was just temporary. And here it is several years later, and it doesn't seem like it's going away. And then we had some technological challenges. It'd be nice if we could change our systems to deal with all of this throughput, but it's our own internal systems, our vendors' systems. It was sort of, we wanted everybody to change really quickly, but we couldn't do it ourselves. We really couldn't expect our vendors to do that either. So the change wasn't going to happen fast enough for us. So instead, we've got a lot of complex and a lot of manual workarounds to deal with the things that the systems won't do for us. I won't even tell you how many Google Docs we use on a daily basis at work. And then there's the whole idea that, of course, we were started as an advocacy organization. We were here to disrupt publishing, not to do the same things that publishers everywhere else did. And so we had a little bit of resistance to doing things the way everybody else did it. And because we were disrupting traditional publishing, we hadn't hired people who knew publishing. So we didn't have a lot of that internal experience. And so the people who were working in production and in editorial to some extent did the best they could. I'm not blaming anyone. They managed all this stuff, but they made it up as they went along. So we did do some reinventing of the wheel. And where there were standard workflows out in the world, we really didn't use them very much. So I'm going to show you a diagram that's already out of date, but just to give you an idea, the purple at the top is editorial, and so we would accept a manuscript, it would drop down into production, and you notice in that next part, that preparing manuscript for production, this IQC is initial quality control and check for completeness, CFC. And that piece is handled by an external vendor. And you notice there's this arrows going up and down with editorial and with the author. This was a bad thing. This is still happening, but it's in the process of being changed. So even after the author has gotten their acceptance letter, they're being asked to make changes. They're being questioned about some of the things that they've done, and we're doing a lot of checks after the fact. Once that's finished, it goes into a step called prepare manuscript, which is really a technical check to just pull things together and get it ready for the comp vendor. That's also handled by an external vendor. We assign it to the composition vendor. We work with Charlesworth. It goes to them. That's the yellow down there, the composition vendor. They create a proof. You notice there's no copy edit step, and it goes back up to production. There is no author proof step either. So it goes back to proof QC, also handled by an external vendor. And that may go back and forth a couple of times. It should be an arrow that goes both ways. And then when it's ready, it goes out to our, oh, I'm sorry. So it does go back to Charlesworth for final creation of the final proof, final manuscript, PDF, as well as the finished NLM XML. And we ingest it into our own system. We host our own art journals. And so it comes into our system. That's the web end on the pink there. We have some internal staff that work on that, but we also have Web QC, which goes back up to the green. That's another external vendor doing the Web QC, looking at how the article renders online, matching it against the proof, and then any corrections that need to be made, and then we publish. We also syndicate out to Crossref, PMC, and a number of other places. And again, it is online only. So, as I said, there's a lot that needs to be cleaned up here. A lot of things that would make this a smoother, faster process. Initially, when I started anyway, the production from accept to publication was taking at least 6 weeks. It has shortened recently, and it will shorten even further. But in the meantime, over the past year or so, we've been starting a lot of these process improvement initiatives with several goals. We want to improve the quality of published papers, increase the service to authors, and decrease the time to publication. So, you know, that tension between speed and quality is in this order for us right now. Fast enough is fast enough for now. We really need to change the quality. Last year we had, so we're publishing about 3,000 articles a month. We get about 100 requests for corrections a month. It's not a bad percentage, but it's a lot of work. And I'll talk a little bit about how we handle corrections and how we've changed that over the past 6 months. But that's also goes to the second bullet point there, which is increasing service to authors. They should see a proof. They should have a chance to make the changes that would make their paper not have to be corrected after the fact. So how are we approaching this? So we've formed some teams. We've reorganized our whole publishing group. So previously, the production and the web group were in a completely separate part of the organization from editorial and publication services, which is my area. Now we've pulled that together. We all report up into the same portion of the executive team. We work on, we've been working to collaborate more, to coordinate our work more, so that so we can actually make change that's going to help the whole publishing organization. We are trying to be much more proactive rather than reactive. Of course, when you have no idea what's coming in the door next, like back in 2010, it's really hard not to just be reactive. We had to be. Now that we've gotten used to this crazy pace of things, we can actually stop and look at it and see, what do we need to change here? How do we plan for the future rather than just reacting to what happens next? We did bring in a consultant to help us, especially on this production side of things, and that has been fabulous. I won't tell you who she is because we have her now. Don't even try. But we're taking the time to assess what we're doing and plan for the future. We are looking at adopting industry standards where they make sense for us. So we're still looking to disrupt, but in the appropriate places, not just for sake of disruption. We're making informed choices about where to put in place industry standards and where to beat a new path. And then we're also looking at our use of vendors. Where does it make sense to continue to outsource? Where should we take more control over those processes? So that's been a lot of what we've been doing over the past year, and especially in the production end, the past 6 to 9 months. So some examples. We have a very big, long list of things we're changing, but I just wanted to show you some of the examples of things that, things in green at the top there have been done. They're finished. The things in the sort of lighter orange are in the works right now, and the things at the bottom are coming along, but a little more slowly. And some of them have dependencies, so there's no way we can do author proofs if we don't change that workflow process. If we don't check the papers in the editorial process before we accept them, so that we're not dealing with the authors in production as much as possible, then we certainly can't do author proofs. So we've done a number of things. So with the, I'll mention just a little bit about the corrections process. So when I started at PLOS, we were posting corrections as comments to articles. So all of the articles on the PLOS website have the ability for people to come in and make comments. And for the most part, all corrections were done that way. And I said, that seems a little odd. How do users find out that something's been corrected? Well, I have to read the comments, basically. I said, something doesn't seem right about that. And so we set about changing that and making it really compliant with what users expect, authors expect, readers expect, and what is standard in the industry. So instead of having corrections be comments on the articles, they are now articles themselves of the type correction. And they're run through Editorial Manager. We use the Aries Systems Editorial Manager and Production Manager. So we actually have staff put these through so that they actually get published with their own DOI. They get syndicated to PubMed Central, to PubMed, and they're available on our website so that other indexing companies can come in and index them. And so much happier. Oh, and through that project, so I tacked a couple of things onto that project, like, oh, we should really do Crossmark. And so now we have deposited everything back into Crossmark, all the way back for the whole 10 years worth of data, not just PLOS One, all of our journals. And the other thing I got sort of coordinated with that process was direct delivery to PubMed. So authors were complaining, why does it take weeks for my article to show up in PubMed? And so I started asking around, well, so why is that? Because my experience had been, places I'd worked before, that if you deposit to PubMed, your abstract, your metadata, it generally gets indexed within about 2 days. And turned out that we weren't depositing directly to PubMed. We were going, the final articles were all going to PubMed Central, where they were taking their time getting things ready and perfect for PubMed Central and archiving. And then, oh yeah, by the way, they would send them over to PubMed. So, so we changed that. We now syndicate directly to PubMed. Things appear the way they do for every other publisher within about 2 days, and authors are much happier because it's a change of several weeks sometimes. So that was a nice thing. Authors are happier, and it looks like it's faster, even though it didn't publish any faster. But it feels faster. And most people who publish in biomedicine, if it's not in PubMed, it sort of doesn't exist yet. So that was an important thing to do. One of the things we found out when we started looking at our corrections and analyzing what was going on there was that a lot of the corrections were due to figure problems. And so we've updated our figure guidelines and reposted those online, tried to make them more simplified so that people could follow them. We've also upgraded our instructions to our composition vendor about figures too, which has helped a lot. I think we had not been completely clear about how we expected things to be done. Some of these other things we know that a lot of the issues we have with layout are because of the complexity of a 2-column layout. So we've developed a new single-column layout, which has just gone through the review by our editors. They're happy with it. We're happy with it. We think it's going to be much easier. We started working with our vendor to put that into place. We're also trying to reduce the number of errors by exporting and using more of the metadata directly from Editorial Manager to the comp vendor. So it's already in XML. It would be a lot easier if they didn't have to take it from the manuscript, and we wouldn't have the problems of, well, maybe they're misreading it in a way. So we're working hard to get more of that metadata standardized and checked by the author in the manuscript system, and let them know this is what's going to be on your article. It's not going to be what's on the front page of your manuscript. This is, you check it here instead of there. And so that's going to be a big shift for people, I think. But I think it's an important thing to do. 2 minutes. Okay, I can do that. So the other thing is, we've had those technical checks after acceptance. Those are in the process of being moved to before acceptance. So they're all going into the editorial workflow. We're working very hard with our vendors and internal staff to get that into place. We're looking at doing more intense figure checking also before acceptance. And then we have all sorts of issues any of you who work with LaTeX know, and math. These are always difficulties, but we seem to have a lot of difficulties with these papers. So we're looking at ways to improve the handling of those kinds of papers. And then once we've straightened out some of these other things, we will definitely go to author proofs, but I can't say when yet. That's all I have, so.
Thank you.